Around the year 382 before Christ, in the rugged hills of Macedon, Philip was born, the third son of King Amyntas III and his wife Eurydice. Macedon, at that time, was a rough kingdom, almost barbaric in the eyes of the refined Greek city-states like Athens and Thebes. Raised in a stone palace in Pella, the capital, Philip grew up in a world of political intrigue and constant danger. His early years were shaped by instability. His father faced internal revolts and external threats from neighboring tribes such as the Illyrians and Thracians. As a young man, Philip was sent as a hostage to Thebes, an experience that, far from being merely humiliating, became a school of strategy. There, he observed the methods of the great Theban general Epaminondas, absorbing lessons in warfare and diplomacy that would later define his reign. In 359 before Christ, tragedy struck Macedon. Perdiccas III, Philip's older brother and the reigning king, led the army against an Illyrian invasion. The battle was a disaster. Perdiccas was killed, along with 4,000 Macedonian soldiers, leaving the kingdom on the brink of collapse. Macedon was surrounded by enemies, Illyrians to the west, Thracians to the east, and the Greeks to the south, who viewed the Macedonians as little more than savages. The throne, in theory, belonged to Perdiccas's young son, Amyntas IV, still a child. But the nobles and generals, desperate for leadership, turned to Philip, then only 23 years old. He was not the natural heir, but his sharp intellect and undeniable charisma made him the obvious choice. Philip assumed power at a moment of crisis. The royal treasury was empty, the army decimated, and neighboring tribes sensed weakness, ready to invade. Greek cities, such as Athens, supported rival claimants to the throne, while Macedonian nobles schemed among themselves. But Philip was no ordinary man. He possessed a vision that went beyond mere survival. He wanted to transform Macedon into a powerhouse. His first move was to avoid direct confrontation with the Illyrians, who were still celebrating their victory over Perdiccas. Instead of fighting, he negotiated. With promises of tribute and agreements, he bought time to breathe. At the same time, he used his diplomatic skill to appease the Thracians and neutralize rival claimants to the throne, such as Argaeus, backed by Athens, whom he defeated with a small but loyal army. While addressing external threats, Philip turned his attention inward. The Macedonian army was disorganized, composed of poorly trained peasants and arrogant nobles with their own agendas. He began to reform it, inspired by what he had seen in Thebes. He introduced strict discipline, rigorous training, and new tactics, such as the Phalanx formation, which would later become legendary. He also recognized that the loyalty of the nobles was fragile. To unite them, he arranged strategic marriages and offered lands, turning rivals into allies. His energy seemed tireless. Within months, he stabilized the borders, strengthened the army, and consolidated his internal power. Philip II did not merely save Macedon from collapse. He laid the foundations for an empire. His rise was not a matter of chance, but the work of a brilliant mind that combined courage, cunning, and patience. At 23, he already showed the spark of a king who would change the fate of the ancient world. When Philip II ascended to the throne of Macedon in 359 before Christ, he inherited an army that was little more than a ragtag collection of poorly trained peasants and feuding noblemen, ill-equipped to face the kingdom's many enemies. The Illyrians had just crushed Macedon's forces, killing 4,000 soldiers and the king himself, Perdiccas III. The kingdom was vulnerable, its borders threatened by Thracians, Illyrians, and ambitious Greek city-states. But Philip, with his sharp mind honed by years as a hostage in Thebes, saw not just a broken army, but an opportunity. He set out to forge a fighting force that would not only save Macedon, but make it a power to be feared across the ancient world. Philip's most enduring innovation was the creation of the Macedonian Phalanx, a revolutionary infantry formation that would redefine warfare. Drawing inspiration from Theban tactics, he equipped his soldiers with the sarissa, a spear stretching up to 18 feet long, far longer than the traditional Greek hoplite spear. This allowed his troops to strike enemies from a distance, keeping them at bay while maintaining a tight, disciplined formation. The phalanx was a wall of bristling spears, with rows of soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder, their shields overlapping, creating an almost impenetrable front. Philip drilled his men relentlessly to master this formation. ensuring they could maneuver as a single, cohesive unit, turning the Phalanx into a living battering ram on the battlefield. But Philip's vision went beyond new weapons and formations. He understood that a great army required discipline and professionalism. Before his reign, Macedonian soldiers were often farmers called to fight only when needed, loyal more to their local lords than to the king. Philip changed this. He created a standing army, paying his soldiers regularly to ensure their loyalty and dedication. Training was grueling and constant, transforming raw recruits into hardened warriors. He instilled a sense of unity, breaking down the old rivalries among the nobles who led his troops. By fostering camaraderie and shared purpose, he turned the army into a brotherhood, loyal to him and to Macedon. Philip also recognized the power of combined arms. While the Phalanx formed the backbone of his army, he developed an elite cavalry unit known as the Companions. These heavily armored horsemen, drawn from Macedon's nobility, were trained to charge with devastating force, often striking the enemy's flanks or rear while the Phalanx held the center. This synergy between infantry and cavalry gave Philip's army unmatched flexibility, allowing it to adapt to different terrains and tactics. He further strengthened his forces with specialized units, such as slingers and archers, and invested in siege technology, including early catapults, making his army capable of both open-field battles and prolonged sieges. To fund these reforms, Philip secured access to the gold and silver mines of Mount Pangaeus, using the wealth to equip his soldiers with high-quality armor and weapons. He also reorganized the army's logistics, ensuring steady supplies of food and equipment, which allowed his troops to campaign far from home without faltering. His reforms were not just about weapons or tactics, but about creating a machine of war, disciplined, versatile, and relentless. By the time Philip was done, the Macedonian army was unrecognizable from the shattered force he had inherited. It was a professional, well-coordinated juggernaut, capable of crushing tribal warbands and outmaneuvering the proud armies of Greece. These reforms not only secured Macedon's survival, but laid the groundwork for the conquests of his son, Alexander the Great, who would carry the Macedonian phalanx to the ends of the known world. Philip II's genius was in seeing that true power began with a disciplined army, and his reforms turned a kingdom on the brink of ruin into a force that would shape history. When Philip II took the throne of Macedon in 359 before Christ, his kingdom was a shadow of its potential, hemmed in by hostile neighbors and weakened by internal strife. Yet, with a mind as sharp as a sarissa and a will forged in the crucible of crisis, Philip set out to expand Macedon's borders, transforming it from a beleaguered backwater into a dominant power. Through a masterful blend of military might, cunning diplomacy, and strategic marriages, he conquered vast territories, secured vital resources, and laid the foundation for an empire that would echo through history. Philip's first challenge was to secure Macedon's vulnerable frontiers. To the west, the Illyrians, who had recently crushed his brother's army, loomed as a constant threat. Rather than risk another devastating defeat, Philip initially used diplomacy, offering tribute to appease them while he rebuilt his forces. By 358 before Christ, with his reformed army ready, he turned the tables. In a swift campaign, he defeated the Illyrian king Bardalus, reclaiming lost lands and securing Macedon's western border. This victory was more than territorial. It proved that Philip's new military machine could deliver decisive blows. To the east, the Thracians controlled fertile lands and access to the Aegean Sea, critical for trade and wealth. Philip launched a series of campaigns, methodically subduing Thracian tribes and establishing fortified settlements to solidify his control. His conquest of the region around Mount Pangaeus was a game-changer. The gold and silver mines there filled Macedon's coffers, providing the wealth to fund his growing army, bribe potential allies, and fuel further expansion. These resources turned Macedon from a poor kingdom into one with the financial muscle to rival the Greek city-states. In the south, Thessaly, a land of rich plains and skilled horsemen, was both a prize and a challenge. Its fractured city-states were often at odds, making it ripe for Philip's diplomacy. He allied with some Thessalian factions, using promises of protection and mutual gain, while defeating others in battle. By 352 before Christ, through a mix of military victories and political maneuvering, Philip was elected as the Archon of Thessaly, effectively bringing the region under his influence without outright conquest. This move not only expanded his territory, but also gave him access to Thessaly's renowned cavalry, enhancing his military might. Philip's expansion was not solely the work of swords and spears. His diplomatic genius was equally formidable. He understood that brute force alone could not sustain an empire, so he wove a web of alliances through strategic marriages. Philip himself took multiple wives, each marriage sealing a political bond. His union with Olympias of Epirus secured an alliance with that western kingdom, while marriages to daughters of Thracian and Illyrian leaders pacified potential enemies. These alliances often turned rivals into reluctant partners, neutralizing threats without a single battle. His campaigns were carefully calculated. Philip avoided overextending his forces, choosing targets that offered strategic or economic advantages. In the Chalcidice Peninsula, he seized key cities like Amphipolis, gaining control of vital trade routes and more gold mines. Each conquest was followed by efforts to consolidate power, whether through garrisons, new settlements, or alliances with local elites. His ability to balance force and persuasion made his expansion sustainable, as conquered regions were integrated into Macedon's growing domain. By the mid-340s before Christ, Philip's Macedon was unrecognizable from the weak kingdom he had inherited. Illyria, Thrace, and Thessaly were either under his control or bound to him through alliances. The wealth from Mount Pangaeus funded an army that grew stronger with each victory, while his diplomatic marriages created a network of loyalty that stretched across the Balkans. Philip's territorial expansion was not just about land. It was about building a power base that could challenge even the mighty Greek city-states to the south. His ambition, tempered by pragmatism, set the stage for his ultimate goal, the unification of Greece under Macedonian rule, a dream that would soon bring him face to face with Athens and Thebes. By the mid-340s before Christ, Philip II of Macedon had transformed his kingdom into a formidable power, its borders secure, its coffers brimming with gold, and its army a disciplined machine of war. Yet his ambitions stretched beyond the rugged hills of Macedon. To the south, the Greek city-states, proud, fractious, and fiercely independent, stood as both a challenge and an opportunity. Athens, with its naval might, and orators like Demosthenes railing against the barbarian king, and Thebes, with its storied sacred band, viewed Macedon with disdain. Philip, however, saw a fractured Greece ripe for unification under his leadership, not just for power, but to forge a coalition strong enough to challenge the vast Persian Empire. Through relentless campaigns, cunning diplomacy, and a decisive victory, he would bend the Greek world to his will. Philip's quest to dominate Greece was a delicate dance of war and negotiation. The Greek city-states were a patchwork of rivalries, each jealously guarding its autonomy. Athens controlled the seas, Thebes boasted a formidable army, and smaller states like Corinth and Sparta shifted allegiances as suited their interests. Philip began by exploiting these divisions. He offered alliances to some, promising protection or mutual gain, while isolating others through calculated provocations. His earlier conquests in Thrace and the Chalcidice had already alarmed Athens, which relied on those regions for grain and trade. Demosthenes, the Athenian orator, delivered fiery speeches, the famous Philippics, warning of the Macedonian threat, but Philip's diplomacy often outpaced his critics. He bribed key figures, negotiated truces, and used his growing wealth to sow discord among his enemies. The turning point came in 338 before Christ at the Battle of Chaeronea, a clash that would reshape the Greek world. Philip, leading his battle-hardened Macedonian army, faced a coalition of Athens, Thebes, and their allies. His phalanx, armed with long sarissas, held the center, while his elite companion cavalry, led by his young son Alexander, waited for the decisive moment. Philip employed a brilliant feint. He ordered his phalanx to retreat on one flank, luring the overconfident Greeks into breaking formation. As they pursued, gaps opened in their lines, and Alexander's cavalry charged, shattering their ranks. The sacred band of Thebes, renowned for its bravery, was surrounded and destroyed, and the allied army collapsed. Chaeronea was a triumph of Philip's military reforms and strategic genius, proving Macedon's supremacy over Greece's finest. With Athens and Thebes defeated, Philip could have imposed harsh terms, but his vision was broader than conquest. He sought unity, not subjugation. In 337 before Christ, he summoned representatives from across Greece to Corinth and established the League of Corinth, a grand alliance under his leadership. The League was a masterstroke of diplomacy. Each city-state retained nominal independence, but all swore to maintain peace and support Philip as hegemon, or supreme leader. The terms were generous enough to win grudging acceptance, yet firm enough to ensure Macedonian dominance. Sparta, ever defiant, refused to join, but its isolation rendered it irrelevant. Philip's League was not just a political arrangement, it was a platform for his ultimate ambition, a united Greek campaign against the Persian Empire, which he saw as both a threat and a prize. Philip's dominion over Greece was a testament to his ability to blend force with finesse. He had not only defeated his enemies, but also convinced them to follow him. The League of Corinth gave him the authority to mobilize Greece's resources for his planned invasion of Persia, a dream he would not live to fulfill. Yet, his triumph was bittersweet. The Greeks, though united under his banner, harbored resentment, and voices like Demosthenes still whispered of resistance. Philip II had achieved what no Greek leader had, a unified Greece, bound not by love, but by necessity and the shadow of his unbeatable army. His dominion set the stage for his son Alexander to carry Macedon's banner across the known world, proving that Philip's legacy was not just a kingdom, but a vision that reshaped history. 2. By 336 before Christ, Philip II of Macedon stood at the pinnacle of his power. He had transformed a fractured kingdom into a mighty empire, subdued the Greek city-states, and forged the League of Corinth, uniting Greece under his leadership with dreams of conquering the Persian Empire. Yet, in a moment of celebration, his life was cut short, and the shadows of intrigue cast a veil over his death. His assassination, steeped in mystery, marked the end of a transformative reign, but ignited a legacy that would reshape the ancient world through his son, Alexander the Great. The scene was set in Aegae, the ancient capital of Macedon, during the lavish wedding of Philip's daughter, Cleopatra, to Alexander of Epirus. The festivities were a display of Macedonian power, attended by dignitaries from across Greece and beyond, a testament to Philip's diplomatic triumphs. As he entered the theater, surrounded by his court and unguarded to show his trust in his allies, a young nobleman named Pausanias struck. Pausanias, a member of Philip's bodyguard, drove a dagger into the king's chest, killing him instantly. The assassin fled, but was swiftly pursued and cut down by Philip's loyal guards. At 46 years old, Philip II, the architect of Macedon's rise, was dead, his ambitions left unfinished. The motives behind Pausanias' act remain shrouded in speculation. Some ancient accounts point to personal grievances. Pausanias had been wronged in a dispute and felt humiliated by Philip's failure to deliver justice. But whispers of deeper intrigue swirled. Philip's wife, Olympias, a fierce and ambitious woman from Epirus, had clashed with her husband over his many marriages and the question of succession. Some suspected her hand in the plot, believing she sought to secure the throne for her son, Alexander. Others wondered if Alexander himself, then 20 years old and eager to prove his worth, might have been complicit, though no evidence directly implicates him. The truth, obscured by time and political motives, likely lies in the tangled web of Macedonian court rivalries, where loyalty was as fleeting as a summer storm. Philip's death sent shockwaves through Macedon and Greece, threatening to unravel his hard-won unity. Yet, his legacy proved stronger than the chaos that followed. He left behind a kingdom transformed, no longer a weak, divided land, but a powerhouse with a professional army, a brimming treasury, and a network of alliances. The Macedonian Phalanx, his diplomatic League of Corinth, and the wealth from the mines of Mount Pangaeus were tools he had crafted with precision. These became the foundation for his son, Alexander, who ascended the throne at 20 and inherited not just a crown, but a vision. Alexander would take his father's achievements to heights Philip could scarcely have imagined. The conquests of Asia, from Persia to India, were built on the army and alliances Philip had forged. The League of Corinth, designed to unite Greece against Persia, became the springboard for Alexander's campaigns. Even the dream of challenging the Persian Empire, which Philip had planned but never executed, became reality under his son. In a way, Alexander's legendary conquests were Philip's triumph as well, a testament to the enduring strength of his reforms and ambitions. Philip II's legacy was not just in the lands he conquered or the army he built, but in his vision of a united Greece, strong enough to stand against the world's greatest empire. His assassination, though tragic, could not erase the mark he left. From the ashes of his death rose a new era, one where Macedon's name would echo across continents. Philip had turned a kingdom on the brink of ruin into the heart of an empire, and in doing so, he set the stage for one of history's greatest sagas, carried forward by the son he raised to conquer the stars.